a few things, you'll like some of them and you won't like some others, but I don't care. When I was growing up, when I was at school, I remember my grandma and granddad never once asked me how I was getting on at school. They just asked me one question: do you hate Tories or don't you hate them, Paul? That's the only education you need. And people have heard this before, but it's true. I came home from school one day when I was 10, and I says to my grandma, I says, look grandma, the teacher at school's told me that I've got to pray for Winston Churchill because he's poorly. And my grandma said to me, he's not as poorly as he would be if I got my hands on him. On last Friday night, it was my mother's 80th birthday, and I was talking to her, and she says, like a lot of people do at that age, they see the Second World War as a turning point. They always say, before the war, that was a dark period in British history. And she says, Paul, it's just like it was before the war. The rich are getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer. Yeah. And the statistic came out last week, a phenomenal statistic, that the top 0.001% of people in the United States had more earnings last year than the 35 million people who live in Canada. That's the world we live in. And we're in a pension situation in local government where the government has said we want £1 billion worth of savings out of the pension scheme over the next 2 years. Now, I don't normally talk about myself and my own personal circumstances, but I looked on Wednesday night on the calculator on the UNISON website at my own circumstances, and the pension increase for me will be £78 a month increase in contributions, a £40 a week less pension, and retirement at 68. That's what they're saying to me for £1 billion. The 77 richest people in Britain last year earned £30 billion extra between them last year. The 77 richest people. And they're saying to us, we have to take that sort of cut. And you need to understand the Tories. This is the statistic you need to understand. In 1913, the biggest occupation in Britain was not the railways, was not coal mining. The biggest occupation in Britain in 1913 was domestic service. And that's what they want to return us to. No holidays, no pension, no pay rise, no bloody nothing. And we won't have it. Now David Cameron, whose father was a banking millionaire, whose grandfather was a banking millionaire, who said about the looting, these people shouldn't be looting, they should be saving up. What has he ever bloody saved up for? He said everybody should pay off the credit card. Well, do you know what credit card is? Credit card is tick. Credit card is slate. They've never had credit card because they've always had everything. This is a man who last week paid £137,000 in cash to extend his driveway and his garden. And he's saying to me, pay £77 a month more. And I say to him, be gone Cameron, we don't want people like you and your millionaire bankers that you represent. Now when I was on the student demonstrations earlier this year, I saw the best placard I have ever seen. And it's the only placard that David Cameron and myself will agree on. A young person was carrying a placard that said, we demand rich parents for all. Unfortunately, he's made that demand and I'm still striving for it, as are my children. But what happens in society, the ordinary working class people, because that's something we need to reintroduce to politics, isn't it? Everybody keeps telling us that we can't talk about class. Class is the one thing that unites us and divides us from them, because they know about solidarity. At Eton and at Harrow and at Westminster, Clegg and Cameron learnt about solidarity. We need to learn about it at work, because they're our enemy. And there's an old saying in America, the Teamsters Union in America, which are truck drivers, they have a saying. The only friend you've got, never let a stranger into your cabin, into your home, or into your heart, unless he's a friend of Labour. Because a friend of Labour is the only friend you've got. And here today, you've seen the realities of British society. Oscar Wilde said, everybody in Britain is paid in inverse proportion to their usefulness. And I've been up there at Civic One today and seen people on £157,000 a year acting as commissionaires, bringing scabs in from the Merry England and taking them into Civic Centre 1. But if you did a job evaluation and a grading of them, they wouldn't be getting £157,000 a year, and they'd say that them people should be downgraded, that they shouldn't get shift pay, that their pay should be lower, but they're prepared to do that job, just like their lights were prepared to do it in the 1926 general strike. They won't do it on a daily basis, but they'll do it to undermine ordinary working people's pensions and ordinary working people's standards of living. And nothing changes. 9 children die every 1 minute in the world through starvation. 1 million people in Britain, aged between 18 to 24, are unemployed. What has happened to the world? When I left school in 1973, my careers officer said to me, "Paul, I'm a bit worried for you. By the year 2000, electricity will be free. The average working week will be 5 hours. You'll be getting wages of between £2,000 and £3,000 a week, and the main planning problem facing Britain will be that we have to build that many leisure centres for how much spare time you've got that you won't know what to do." What's the reality? The reality is the world that was passed on to us by those who built the welfare state, we have been able to pass it on to the next generation without a fight. Now it's a plan, it's not an accident. There is no economic crisis. The average pay rise last year for the richest 100 people in Britain and the top 100 companies directors, the average pay rise last year was 47%, and the average pay rise the year before that was 55%. And he said today, because this is their plan, don't think this is going to be a one-day strike, because it isn't. They've said today, because you've gone on strike, we're going to get rid of national pay bargaining. They were always going to try and get rid of national pay bargaining. This is an assault on your standard of living. There was a saying in the 1926 general strike, the Tories only have one plan, to tie your hands behind your back and take the money out your pockets, and nothing's changed in that period since then. And I'll finish on these 2 points. I spoke at a rally in Leeds earlier this year, and the next speaker after me got up to speak, and she was 12 years old. Now, being a father of 2 daughters, I've heard enough from 12-year-old girls to not want to hear the next speaker. But she made the best speech that I've ever heard. It was a speech of 2 lines. She said, as she walked out on strike in support of the students in the battle against student union fees, she said, a teacher shouted at her and said, "Susan, Susan, where are you going?" And she replied, "I thought I was going to university, but it doesn't look like I will be." So we're here today on these steps, not accidentally, in front of somebody who wouldn't have said cross a picket line. He'd have had the sense to say, if there'd have been a strike now and Harold Wilson had been the leader of the Labour Party, he would have at least had the sense to say, if they were cutting my pension like that, I would be doing something about it. Now, John Barkow, who is the Speaker of the House of Commons, besides his MP's pension, besides that, gets a £40,000 a year pension for being the Speaker of the House of Commons for 1 day. As long as he takes the job up and turns up for 1 day, he gets a £40,000 a year pension, on top of his MP's pensions. They live in a paradise. There are 32 bars in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Beer is 30 pence a pint. That's the sort of working men's club we all want to be a member of. But the one thing they do not understand, for those MPs like Mike Wood who stand shoulder to shoulder with us, the one thing they do not understand, the workers, united, will never be defeated.